Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Monday Q&As. So let's get this started. First question. In the UFC, a lot of fighters that are now off the juice/TRT seem to be more susceptible to knockouts. A lot of fans and people in the media seem to be speculating that the lack of gear is affecting their ability to take a punch. Are they correct that the chin is affected by lower test levels, or is it simply that these athletes perform worse and leave themselves more open off TRT? Well, as far as the jaw being affected, the argument there has to do with bone deposits and bone growth from the drugs. That's not going to go away if they come off. It might reduce slightly if they come off for 5 or 10 years, but that's mostly permanent bone growth if they've seen any growth of the lower jaw structure as a result of androgen. So that's ridiculous. As far as the other thing goes, well, people are making a presupposition that they're coming off just because they claim they're coming off. That's absurd. These are professional athletes. There's no way they're competing clean and making millions of dollars. Sorry, not even remotely imaginable. Anybody who believes it's possible lives in a fantasy world full of unicorns, fairies, and dragons. Which, I mean, I enjoy fantasy as much as the next person, but I don't accept it as reality. Makes for great video games and RPGs and novels, but that's about it. Now, as far as the other thing goes, any other possible thing there, yeah, they might be tapering off slightly or coming off or going on purely undetectable things during match time because they know they might get tested at the match. So that could be reducing aggression slightly because they don't have any hard androgens in their system, because they probably don't want to risk using anything that might get them caught at that time. So that could lower aggression. That lower aggression could actually make you more susceptible to knockouts because of psychological factors. There's a lot to be said for aggression, determination, and stopping shock and other things that put your body into shock. So that could be a factor there, absolutely. But are they actually off everything? No, that's unreasonable to assume. These are pro athletes. People need to get in the real world. All right, next question. Why do some of the top squatters in the world, Yngvar Christensen comes to mind, walk the bar out even when in a monolift? Wouldn't this be a waste of energy? I've been considering doing this because if you guys watched me, for example, I got red lighted due to my setup issue at the British Nationals for my opening squat coming out of the monolift. And the reason for that is that I don't have access to a monolift year-round. I don't train in one. A lot of these lifters are the same way. They need to have repetitiveness and ritual and repeat the same thing over and over with their setup to get it right, or else they'll actually be possibly weaker. And so if they're used to always walking it out during training because they don't have access to a monolift, a lot of lifters will take the slight loss of energy to get a consistent setup in which they're lower risk of being red lighted once they're in the zone and they're just going by their training now. They're no longer really thinking and concentrating. They're hyped up. Whatever they've trained to do is what they're going to do, and they don't want to risk changing something and trying to just set up before they unrack and not walk it out if that's what they're used to doing. It has to do with being consistent so that they don't accidentally get red lighted or mess something up. So for a lot of people, depending on your mindset, it's probably a better idea to go ahead and walk it out anyways, even if it uses a little more energy up and fatigues you a hair more. So that's why you see them doing it, and I've considered going that route myself. All right, next question. Jason, my little brother is almost 10 years old. He's not very good at sports, and the doctor said he has naturally low muscle tone. He's about 30 pounds overweight. He's about 110 pounds when he should be 70. That's 40 pounds, bro. Due to my mom feeding him junk food all day, I was thinking about getting him started in weight training. Is he too young for squats, deadlifts, benches, etc.? Any advice? No, I wouldn't. Honestly, at that age, I really wouldn't put someone on resistance training. It's probably not going to benefit them much, if at all. And the risks aren't worth it. What I would do is just body weight exercises, get him active, get him playing sports, get him sprinting, maybe some body weight exercises, push-ups, train him to do assisted pull-ups, do some jumping squats with just his body weight. Things that are going to just be helpful for overall activity that can be fun for him. Have him do that stuff every day. Sprinting, throwing stuff. Just get him active in things that he can do that are fun rather than focusing on barbells and numbers. And get him into some sports. He's probably not good at sports because he's out of shape. It's probably not lack of inherent talent. It's lack of the motor skills and the strength from being active. And that's why. Just get him active. I wouldn't put him under a barbell at that age. Maybe 14 or 15. But at 10 years old, no, there's no point. He's not going to be able to gain muscle at an appreciable rate from it, and it's just not worth the possible risk. I just don't see him getting anything out of it that he wouldn't get out of those other movements already. So that's my opinion on it. All right, next question. If most people get enough micronutrients and fiber from a normal diet, in regards to how few cases there are of micronutrient deficiencies in the U.S., what are the health benefits of eating only micronutrient-dense foods? Okay, you are right there. Actual vitamin and mineral deficiencies are not as common as people think they are in the U.S., in the Western world, because people eat so many calories that they make up for it even with all of the lower micronutrient-rich foods. All the junk foods, as people like to call them, still have micronutrients in them. They're not void of them, and they eat so much food. They usually get enough anyways. It might be slightly deficient in some things, at least maybe not true deficiencies, but not at truly ideal amounts. So the question becomes, what are the benefits? Honestly, lower satiation. Overeating easier is one of the big ones, because we could argue all day long about contaminants in whole foods also. But foods that tend to have more fiber, more micronutrients in them, more vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, all that good stuff, tend to be more filling per calorie. You're going to tend to overeat a bit less. And for anyone who's trying to manage their total caloric intake, that's a great tool to keep it in check. It makes it easier to do so in terms of just your appetite. Not saying you can't get fat eating all whole foods, because clearly you can. It just is a bit more difficult to do it. So it makes weight loss easier and not getting fat easier. And it's really as simple as that. People can try to overcomplicate it and come up with all these bizarre theories, but honestly, that's really all it is. That's the benefit. All right, next question. Jason, I have a quad weakness that is limiting my squat and deadlift. I will be starting the Texas method soon and would like to do either high bar beltless squats or beltless front squats on the Wednesday recovery day. Which one of these would be better in your opinion? Well, depending on the weaknesses, honestly, the high bar squat is a superior quad exercise to the front squat for most people. It seems to be a bit of a myth that the front squat is an amazing quad builder. It is compared to some exercises, but it's not any better, and in many cases it's not equal to the high bar squat. Whichever one of those two you can lift more weight on, probably the better in terms of building your quads. So the high bar is oftentimes better for the quads because you can do more weight, whereas in the front squat is better for things like your thoracic erectors and upper back. So if that's a weakness, is mid-back rounding or upper back rounding, things like that, the front squat can be a really good exercise to strengthen that up, just due to the way you have to rack it and the nature of it. So it's better for keeping you more upright. Whereas in the high bar squat puts the same rough amount of tension on your quads as the front squat, but it usually lets you use more weight. So therefore you're going to get more tension on the quads overall. Now, there are individual biomechanics on there that can vary from person to person, so I'm only answering that as a general question there. Obviously, there can be exceptions to those rules. So please don't mean that I'm implying that those are true across the board. So in your case, though, because if you think it's a quad limit, then high bar squats all the way. All right, next question. Does lactose intolerance affect the amount of calories lactose can provide for the body? This is what's always funny. You always see people blame food intolerances for fat gain, which is absurd because in the case of something like this, a food intolerance generally means you lack the correct enzymes to properly break it down in digestion, which means it causes GI tract upset and it can cause you to have diarrhea, loose stool, things like that, which means you're pooping out calories. If you're pooping out calories, you're absorbing less of them. So food intolerances actually can affect your total net calories in and out. And not saying it's a good method of weight loss, because it isn't, because of the GI tract upset and the problems associated with that are bad for your health, bad for your energy levels, everything else. So it's not a good weight loss method, but are you getting full calories? If you're the more lactose intolerant you are, no, you're losing possibly more and more of the calories due to not being able to digest them and absorb them correctly. So you can't absorb all of them, so they end up getting pooped out. I just wouldn't recommend it as a means of weight control for all those obvious reasons. But absolutely not, and you're certainly not going to get fat due to intolerances, because the intolerance means you can't absorb it and utilize it correctly. So you're expelling calories, more calories from the food than someone who can break it down, digest it, and absorb it correctly. All right, next question. Jason, when I do deadlifts with a mixed grip, my bicep on the arm with a supinated hand, that means the one with the palm forward, seems to get really pumped. I'm worried that it might be taking too much of the load and don't want to incur a bicep tear. I feel like I have my elbow totally locked out though. Is it normal for the bicep of the supinated hand to get a pump / burn, or is this indicative of an impending snap city? Thanks. If you are certain the elbow is locked, it is not indicative of snap city. The truth is it puts strain on the bicep. You can build biceps, pump your biceps. In fact, if someone does no arm work, they do no chin-ups, no rows, no curls, and all they did is deadlift starting as a noob, their biceps will actually grow as a result of it. Will they grow as fast as they could off of a curl or a chin-up? No, of course not. But they do stimulate the biceps. You will get a bicep pump from a deadlift, particularly the hand that is supinated. It just means you're stimulating it with tension. And effectively you are. You're not going to rip it as long as you're keeping the elbows locked. The odds are very, very, very low. So don't worry about that as long as you're sure you're locking the elbow out. And that you're not flexing the bicep against it. But they're going to get pumped. They're going to get some development from it for some people, depending on what other exercises you're doing. Now, obviously, there's limits to how much you can grow. And if you're getting enough stimulation from curls or chin-ups, the deadlift isn't going to add any more. But if you're getting insufficient stimulus from those, it might add some growth to them. So it just is what it is. I wouldn't worry about it. Just make sure, get a video, check it, and make sure that you're not bending the elbow on the way up and that's not contributing. In which case, you are subjecting yourself to a higher risk of rupturing that bicep. And as someone who's done it before myself, I can tell you it's no fun. And I just watched a friend of mine the other day do it at the Worlds. The guy who won my weight class at the British tore his at Worlds, just had his surgery this week to get it repaired. Not pretty. All right, last question in part 1. And this is a combined question because I got 2 separate questions that in a lot of ways are similar. I'm going to answer them in one go. Is Steve Cook natty? I don't know or care who Steve Cook is. I get asked about him. I don't care enough to look him up. I don't care. I don't know how familiar you are with boxing, Jason, but do you think accusations of Manny Pacquiao, I probably said that wrong, someone's going to get upset with me, I apologize, taking performance-enhancing drugs are plausible? You know what, guys? Let's go back to this point again of when we're dealing with people who make their living off of their athletic performance or the physical appearance of their physique, they're heavily sponsored athletes making money, the possibility that they are drug-free is slim to none. That's it. People need to get out of this mindset of asking, is this person natty? Is that person natty? Is it possible this person's on drugs? Is it possible that person's on drugs? Look, if they're making their living, the appearance of their physique or their athletic performance, the odds that they are drug-free is about like winning the lottery or getting struck by lightning. It is statistically improbable. In fact, drug-free top-level athletes and models and bodybuilders are so rare as to be statistically completely irrelevant for our conversations and discussions. End of it. That's not being judgmental saying, oh, guilty, because it's not a guilt thing. I don't care. So I'm not making an accusation of guilt. I'm not being a hater. I'm just telling you this is the real world. This is how it works. And if you run around asking that sort of question, you're wasting your time. And since you work off of that rule and just assume that everyone who is making a living off this stuff is on gear, then you can stop worrying about it. You can stop asking the question. And in fact, since they're all doing it, there's no need to even contact and harass individual ones of them or accuse them of it because it's a waste of time. They're all on. All of them. So therefore it becomes a moot point. Who cares at that point? That's just the reality. Get on with your life. It doesn't matter. The only time it matters is if they're trying to sell you a product personally based upon their natty status, in which case you can just laugh and walk away and not buy it. Problem solved. They're going to do what they're going to do. No point dwelling on it. All right, guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.